Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the Nintendo 64th level of the RPG Cave. I'm the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 elf bandit, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Monday evening? We took, kind of like a week off last week, so
yes,
I hope your long weekend was well, and I hope you're doing well, my friend.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Wow, you waited for that one, Nintendo 64th. I like it. That's a good one. That's
it popped into my brain as soon as I started setting up, the live stream today, Garret. That I was like, oh yeah, this is the 64th episode, so it has to be the Nintendo 64th episode because here on the RPG Cave, of course, we celebrate the Nintendo 64 all the time. The console that had exactly 2 RPGs on it. 2. Oh wait, 2. I guess Paper Mario counts, so technically 3, I guess, because you had Quest 64, and then you had Paper Mario, and then you had Tactics Ogre 64. Those are the 3.
And that's pretty much it. You're pretty much done.
It's just all sports games and Nintendo first-party games and multiplayer games.
You go from SNES, all these RPGs in there, and then boom, 64 just kind of.
Well, it's because none of the Japanese manufacturers wanted to work on cartridges. Like that was the problem right there. Like everyone wanted to work on the CDs. And Kevin Ainsworth says in the chat, what it lacked in RPGs, it made up for in Banjo-Kazooie. That would be true if Banjo-Kazooie was a good game. But I think we on the RPG Cave have acknowledged already previously that Banjo-Kazooie is in fact just an okay game. But
we're already on fire here. I mean, by the way, I got my updated booster.
Oh, nice. Is that number 3 or number 4? Is your 4th booster?
This is the it's the second booster, 3rd shot.
Okay.
Oh no, wait, 4th shot because I have Pfizer all the way down.
Okay.
I'm super vaxxed now. Like the Omicron can't get me.
Nice.
Now.
I'm actually waiting until October or November because here in Canada the 4th shot is not super readily available to people yet.
Yeah.
So hopefully in the next month or 2 I'll probably be able to join you in the fourth shot club, the second booster club.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good.
But before you end the show, number 1, if you're watching the live stream right now, I just wanted to give you a heads up that tomorrow is going to be a very busy day here on Carpool Gaming. We got the Nintendo Direct. We've got a episode of Nintendo Drive later in the evening with Sean and a possible guest. And then we also got the PlayStation Drive doing a PlayStation State of Play Reacts and an episode of the PlayStation Drive tomorrow. So you're going to want to stay tuned to our channel all day tomorrow.
It's like Gaming. E3.
It is pretty much. I can't believe Nintendo and Sony decided to announce their showcase on the same day. That's kind
of like, a random Tuesday, September 13th.
Yeah.
Who would have thunk? In fact, all of these shows.
In fact, I think, I joked about this in the Discord, but I think, we haven't talked about this yet, but maybe next week might end up being like an RPG news break episode of this show rather than a normal show, because who knows, it sounds like we could be getting a lot.
There could be so many,
but that's all in the future. That's future Ryan and Garrett's problem. Right now, of course, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number 1, if you're watching the live stream, write me out over at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, or if you're watching the video on demand later, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, ding ding ding, ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we go live with our news videos, or let us know in the comments below some of your favorite RPG spin-offs. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're listening on audio feeds, don't forget to subscribe there as well, or rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or listening on those platforms. Also, if you want this show or some of those shows a little bit early, head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/carpoolgaming. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar, and out comes content, including a bunch of exclusive content coming out soon, including a new episode of the Yimby Capri podcast where Sean and I talked about feelings. A lot, so you can go listen.
Sounds so
you can go listen to that episode. But yeah, we got we got into the weeds with some feelings on that one. And then last but not least, if you want an RPG Cave t-shirt or any other Carpool Gaming merch, head on over to our merch store at bit.ly/CPG merch. Well, without further ado, because we've got the people waiting long enough, Garret, it's time for us to read from the sacred texts. Because I think we got a good topic this week, because I was thinking about the idea of how do we celebrate, Soul Hackers 2 coming out at the end of last month, Garret, because, we've already done a Shin Megami Tensei episode. So it wouldn't make sense to do another one. And I mean, the Soul Hacker series isn't even big enough to really do as whole Soul Hacker's specific episode, but it got
Right.
me off on the tangent of, what are some of the best RPG spin-offs of all time? Because Soul Hackers obviously is a spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series. And if you listened to my review earlier this week, it's a pretty darn good game as well. So it's another good game in that franchise. A really good spin-off. Again, not going to be a game I kind of list off tonight, but I wanted to give it a special shout out because we're kind of celebrating it a little bit. So we're going to go back and forth and talk about some of our favorite RPG spin-offs of all time. And then, likewise, we also polled the audience as well. So a lot of y'all let us know what some of your favorite spin-offs are of all time, and we're going to get into some of those in a little bit. But first of all, I think, Garrett, we should probably define what an RPG spin-off is, because, my definition of an RPG spin-off can be twofold, or at least to count for kind of tonight's episode. Either a game from an RPG series that has spun off to do something completely different, whereas to tell it's telling the story from a different character's perspective, or it changes genres, or some kind of different take on an RPG. And likewise, I think that tonight's list also qualifies games that are RPGs that are spin-offs of other franchises. And we'll get to some of those maybe in a little bit as well. But all in all, I think it's going to be a fun night tonight. Also, I just got to give my brother Kyle a huge shout out from last week's episode for filling in for Garrett. Yeah. It was his first podcast editor ever, and I think he did a pretty darn good job talking about Lunar with me. We did it in person in the living room, like right over there. So you can go.
That's cool, man.
Go back and listen to that episode, y'all, if you haven't had a chance to go listen to it. But huge shout out to him for joining me on the holiday weekend last weekend. But Garrett, now that I'm kind of out of breath because I've said just about everything, let's start us off. Everything. I want you to start talking to me about some of your favorite RPG spin-offs of all time. And we'll kind of go back and forth on this one.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I've been thinking a lot about this, mushing around. Like, there's a lot of RPGs I played. What are spinoffs? And I think I've mentioned some RPGs that were spinoffs previously, and I think I've shine a lot of light on certain of those games. So I want to kind of just go through some other big spinoff RPGs that I'm really into. I think one cheap shot would be just the Persona series in general. So guys. Yep. Persona series kind of off limit, that's a mainline series.
We did a whole episode talking about Persona 2, and then in that episode we talked about how it branched off from Shin Megami Tensei. So you're right, we probably don't need to talk about Persona. It wasn't on my list either, but I do have another Shin Megami Tensei spin-off on my list at some point, but again, more on that later.
Great. Well, I just want to get this one out of the list because it is a Persona game, but it's definitely a spinoff. I actually love the spinoff games from the Persona series. I love the Persona Q series. I love the Persona dancing games. I love the heavy rhythm game going on, especially on the Vita. It's very intuitive where the circle's coming out and it's going straight to your buttons. I platinumed that. It was super cool. But the game I want to shout out is Persona Strikers. Because that is the first kind of Koei Tecmo game that kind of released from the Persona series, kind of ripped off from it. I think they're gonna do more later on, just because the way that Koei Tecmo does with their Musou games and kind of copying the certain series or RPG series or whatever really well. They do a very good job of hey, this is a Musou game, but has a lot of elements coming from all of the series that it's adopting from. So Persona Strikers does the same thing. And I think people are kind of mixed with this one. I tended to be more on the positive side just because I think it adds so much value to Persona 5 in general, the universe. I think it was a pretty good storyline. I was tearing up at the end of the story. Added a great line of new characters in there and had some kind of some twists in there for sure. Nowhere near level as Persona 5, I would say, but it's still probably one of the better storylines out of an RPG series.
Yeah.
I like the hack and slash of it. I really do enjoy the rhythm of it compared to other Koei Tecmo games. I don't know. I can't really get into them as much, especially the general Dynasty Warriors type of aspect. It's just, let me slash everything and go for it. No, this does a pretty good job of like, hey, you can stand still and like do your turn-based tactic battle type of things with your characters. You can like rotate pretty easily between all of the characters as well. There's weapons you can upgrade. There's elemental attacks, and there's like weak and strong versus certain monsters that come after you. I think they did a really good job. With this spinoff overall. I just think it was a little bit long in the tooth. I think everyone
Yeah.
thinks that as well. Where Persona 5, I think it's fine just because it is made like that. That's the framework for Persona. It's meant to be long. Whereas I don't think a Muso game is meant to be too long
Yeah.
as much as Persona Strikers. So I would say if they make another one, let's say for Persona 3 or 4 even, I would say, hey, just cut it maybe half. Like you literally just cut it in half. It'll be
Mhm.
fine. You can sell it for $60. You'll be completely fine.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I mean, they
okay.
seem to be able to sell all the other Muso games for $60 and have them be half the size and have no problem with it. So
Exactly.
I don't see why they couldn't for
So,
Persona either. Like, I'm in the same
yeah.
boat as you with, Strikers, Garrett. Like, I liked it and I really liked the story, but man, like the combat, I just don't think you and I agree on that one because
Oh,
I
okay.
thought it was okay. And I definitely thought it was more, intriguing than most Muso games. But man, it just got really repetitive, and the boss fights in
It did.
particular just felt like super sluggish and like difficult. Like just
Spongy.
more, they just felt annoying to play because you're just kind of just chipping away at the life bar, and it's just
Mhm.
it just killed kind of the pacing for me. Whereas again, like I like the general combat when you're on the maps and stuff like that, but just when you're with the bosses, and I think compounded with the length, you just kind of turned me off from that game a little
Yeah,
bit. But
it
you're
was a long
definitely
game.
right about the story. I think like if they did the same story with a turn-based game, then I think we would have been talking about Strikers being, almost as good as Persona 5 as far as the game is concerned. Because I think, to your point, with the length of the story, it would have probably worked better with a turn-based game. I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah,
So,
I think that's a good one. But yeah, to your point, Persona's got a lot of great spin-offs, like the dancing
it
spin-offs. I
does.
love as well. Like all three of those games are awesome. If
So
y'all
good.
never played them and you like rhythm games, I think they're fantastic pickups. And then of course Persona Q as well. If you like
Yep.
dungeon crawling games, I mean it's definitely one of the best ones out there. So you got a lot of good choices when it comes to Persona specific spin-offs. But
For
Garrett,
sure.
I'm gonna take things full circle here and go back to Shin
Full
Megami
circle.
Tensei to give you my favorite Shin Megami Tensei spinoff, and it's not the Persona series. Although to be fair, like I kind of think of Persona as kind of its own thing at this point. But I'm gonna give it
Right.
a shout out, and I think I've talked about this a teensy bit on another show before. But Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga on PlayStation
Right.
2. These were two games kind of released back to back, and it's kind of like Golden Sun in a way where they're pretty much just one game that was split up into two parts just for the sake of selling you like two different copies of the game rather than putting into one like 80-hour experience. They like each of the games isn't super long or anything like that, but
Hmm.
the hook in this game is how normally in the Shin Megami Tensei games how you're usually recruiting monsters to your party and kind of capturing them.
Yeah.
Well, in this game, what ends up happening is your characters are brought into this like digital universe, and you transform into the monsters yourselves. So, and each of the
Cool.
characters in your party has like a specific monster that they're bonded with, and they like have these
Yeah.
transformations as you go through the battle. But for the most part, the combat's pretty similar to something like Persona 4 in a lot of ways, where you still have your magic attacks and your it's still turn based. You're
Cool.
still actually navigating the dungeon very similarly to the dungeons themselves, similarly to the palaces in Persona 4. And you have like a time
Hmm.
limit associated with each one. It just like Persona 4. It doesn't have like the day to day kind of thing from the Persona series, but it borrows a lot of elements from Persona. It kind of fuses them with a lot more Shin Megami Tensei to have this like really interesting formula, and it's different from any of the other Shin Megami Tensei games. And they've only really done this once with this one series, and they never made
Yeah.
any of the other games in like in this style ever again. So I think these games are really good and kind of underrated PS2 games in particular. And I think they're really solid games. If you've never played them before and you like Shin Megami Tensei, I think it's actually a refreshing take on the formula, and the story and the characters are great as well. Just from what you would expect from a Shin Megami Tensei game. I don't need to really, dive into that too much because, I mean, y'all probably know the pedigree at this point that all their stories are really good, I think. So, Digital Devil Saga, gotta give a shout out to that. I think those games, both 1 and 2, are fantastic. And if you're a PS2 collector and you don't have them yet, I would encourage y'all to check them out. So, there you go.
Sounds good. It looks like it had a pretty high ranking. I remember you mentioning this one, and I was surprised this was not on 3DS because I feel like everything was ported to 3DS.
Yeah, I'm actually very surprised
that
the only re-release of these was on PS3 backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 3 store. You could buy them as PS2 classics.
Wow.
Which then they never brought over to PS4 because they brought some of those games over, but not all of them. Including Persona 3 and Persona 4 were kind of in the same boat too. So they've just been stranded on PS2 this whole time. They've never been re-released anywhere else. So
do you think it would be transferred over eventually in the classics, I don't know, premium PSN line? That would be cool if Atlas played ball a little bit with these games.
Actually, like, it would make those games in particular would make the most sense to do that with. Like, any of the games that are already on PS3 as PS2 classics, to then bring them over to, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 via PlayStation Plus. Like, out of all the PS2 games to come, I think those are the most obvious ones because, they've already done the porting job. They just need to recode it to work for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. So,
cool.
Yeah.
I can imagine being Japanese exclusive because apparently all the cool Japanese games are only Japanese exclusive according to Nintendo Switch Online.
Of course. Of course. But to be fair, the PlayStation 3 store was like that for a lot of stuff, but Atlas stuff specifically, it's actually pretty good for that because like the Devil Summoner games are there too, and those games are like like $800 if you want the PS2 copies of them, or you can buy them for $10 on the PlayStation 3 store and play them on your PlayStation 3 at this point. So
nice.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But and of course, you got to play those to know what happens in Soul Hackers 2, Garrett, because they're part of the same series. So just throwing it out there. But yeah, I hope Digital Devil Saga comes back at some point, whether it is some kind of re-release package, like a dual pack, or if they just release it on PlayStation Plus at some point. But I mean, these are really good games that were reviewed well, but just a lot of people have just forgotten about in the Shin Megami Tensei series. And I think we talked about them.
I can see them porting to PC.
Yeah.
More or less. Yeah.
Yeah.
On Steam. They've been growing interest in the Steam business. So
you don't say, Gary. It's almost like you've got, a whole bunch of Steam stuff going on over there. It's steamy over
at I go. Yeah, steamy. Definitely.
Good God. All right, get us out of this, Garrett. What's next?
Climbing out of this hole. All right, let's talk about Pokemon, Ryan.
There's so many good Pokemon spin-offs, but I'll go ahead and let you.
There's so many great ones, and I think I mentioned some, including like Pokemon Pinball via the GBA. That was one of my first spin-offs I played from the Pokemon series. Amazing. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. It depends if you're into that type of stuff, like dungeon crawling. It's a very classic dungeon crawler with the Pokemon spin, so that was kind of cool. Pokemon Ranger, that was another one where you I don't know if you remember this one, but you're on the DS and you kind of like are wrapping around a Pokemon with like a little rope. And like I remember just as a kid, just like in middle school, just wrapping around the bottom screen like this, like crazy. I actually beat both of those games. I really liked Pokemon Ranger. Pokemon Conquest is another big one, that one of the later ones in 2012. But what I'm going to mention, and I don't think much people know this about Pokemon. I think Pokemon fans do, but not like general like gamers like us. Pokemon Coliseum. That's there are 2 games in the GameCube. Pokemon Coliseum and then Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. And they were both made by one developer. I forgot the exact I think it's Genius Sonority.
Okay.
And they're actually making Pokemon Cafe Mix, Pokemon like these mobile side games now.
Of course they are.
But yes, of course. But they used to develop both of these games. So Pokemon Coliseum, I'll just start with Coliseum. The premise is that you have it's not like you're going out in the wild and you're like catching Pokemon per se and going off on an adventure. It's more like there are dark Pokemon out there in like the whatever that universe is, and then you have to capture those specific dark Pokemon in order to purify them. And then once you purify them, you can put it in your party and you can play them. There's certain conditions that kind of restrict the for you to play with them if they're in a dark mode or whatever. But it's certainly a different way to play Pokemon than it was in the games, in the mainline games. What I really enjoyed about these games specifically, well, one, they were on GameCube, so I was able to play it on the big screen.
Yeah.
It
Which was a
actually
novelty
kinda
back
cool.
then because they
It was a novelty.
That was really because like, you know, we had Pokemon Stadium on N64, which, you know, you had to have like the Game Boy link up to it in order to really play that game because you'd have to transfer monsters over to it. But so like those two games like Coliseum and then Gale of Darkness were like the first time you could really have like a standalone Pokemon experience on your TV that's not the traditional Pokemon style, but, you know, different to your point, Garrett.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that was basically the premise. And then you just go through the storyline. The storyline was actually pretty good. I really liked the animations behind this game. They were actually like, I mean, pretty like for its time, pretty detailed, pretty nice to see. I had a lot of motivation going through these games and capturing all the dark Pokemon and making sure that they're purified. I think Gale of Darkness was a great like sequel to the first one. I think the first one was a little restrictive, and I understood that. But Gale of Darkness, way better. I think a lot more freedom with exploring and going around. There was a lot more Pokemon to catch, but nowhere near as the mainline Pokemon games. Yeah, I liked how it was on already existing Pokemon. I didn't have to worry about learning new ones. And it was just going through the story and then facing off trainers, essentially. Like you don't go out in the wild and capture Pokemon. You go through a story and you capture specific Pokemon.
Yeah,
If they're
it's not
their
like
optional.
an open world kind of Pokemon RPG. It's very
It's not.
different. It's more streamlined, I think.
Definitely streamlined. But I really enjoyed them. Loose price right now, they're around $100.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's conservative.
they're getting up there.
If you go up to price
That's
charting,
conservative, yeah.
If you go over to price charting, they have the loose price listed for $141, and then the complete
Oh,
box
there we go.
price you're up to about $200, and then brand new it's like sealed, we're looking at about $800 for it. So, yeah, it's getting up there. It's
Ooh.
climbing in price like every day. Like it's not getting any cheaper. It's becoming more expensive.
Yeah, they're
the
pretty expensive now. I remember selling them for like $40 to Amazon back in 2013. I was like, "Oh, I'm done with these GameCube games. I
Yeah.
don't need them anymore. I need more games for my Xbox 360 and my upcoming PS4. That's what I wanted." No. I can't believe I did
You
that.
say this, Garrett, but literally I sold my entire GameCube and Xbox collection to buy an Xbox 360 and 5 games at launch.
Oh my
Because
god.
I bought an Xbox 360 at launch, and I sold all of them, everything, including my consoles, to GameStop, like a dum-dum. It's like I kept my PlayStation
I feel
2.
like everyone has that. Like
Yeah.
everyone made that mistake.
Well,
and now they're paying the price.
We got tempted into it, Garrett. We got tempted into it by,
did.
you know, the new hardware and the fact that at the time, you know, I was kind of between jobs and stuff, and I was like, well, I really want the 360. And I really want to play, you know, Peter Jackson's King Kong, the official game in the movie. So clearly I needed to go out and sell my Game Boy Advance player and all my GameCube games and all my Game Boy Advance games.
Oh, that
And
happened.
my
I'm sorry.
original Xbox
You're slowly
games.
getting it back now, right?
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of it back. But GameCube games in particular is like, it's so hard to get back because they are like, ever since
getting
since
expensive.
2020 happened, like GameCube games are like stupidly expensive now. They all are at this point. Except for
Yeah.
the most common ones like Metroid Prime, and even that's getting up there too. Like that's starting to get to like the $50 and $60 range, which again doesn't sound like much, but you know, a year or two ago, you could get a copy of Metroid Prime for like $10. So Like
That's
even
crazy.
the more common stuff for GameCube is really starting to get tipping up. But Garrett, I'm glad you brought up Pokemon spin-offs, and you glanced over one of the ones that's actually on my
Oh,
list. You
okay.
kind of skipped over. You're like,
Great.
oh, that game was okay. It was pretty good. And that game, of course, on my list is the weirdest fusion of two franchises, and that
Yes.
being Pokemon Conquest. Because
Yes.
I don't know if you do this, Garrett, but I love Pokemon Conquest on the Nintendo DS.
Yeah.
It kind of, mashes together like the Koei Tecmo Nobunaga's Ambition franchise with Pokemon into this like strategy RPG, and it's awesome. Like I love that game a lot. Like I love, getting my, weird, ancient Japanese, historical figures, hanging out with Bulbasaur and Squirtle and just
Isn't
taking
that
on
crazy?
enemy units together, which again, sounds crazy on paper, but I don't know, it just turned out to be this really awesome tactical role playing game, and I just
Hmm.
sunk so many hours into it on the Nintendo DS and really really enjoyed it. There's also an online mode too, as well, that you can get into as well if you want to play against other people. But I really like Conquest a lot. It's another game too that's like we could have even talked about on the Forgotten RPGs episode, because it's like a game that people
It
just
is really
forget. They
forgotten.
like blanked it out of their minds. They pretend this game doesn't exist, but it existed. And I wish like they were crazy enough to do something like this again, because I think they would be
Me
pretty
too.
cool. Also,
That'd
like
be really cool.
I would like to see more like Pokemon tactical role playing games like that. Like it was a winning
That
formula
sounds
here. Like
super dope.
they've never gone back and done that again. So like that's something I wish they would go do. But Pokemon Conquest was the other one I had to give the shout out to on my list. And also, sticking with Pokemon, and Garrett, I don't know if this is on your list, probably not, but Pokemon Snap, also probably one of the
Oh
best
yeah, a
known,
great one.
really good
Hmm.
Pokemon spinoff as well. I have to at least give it a shout out on
Of
the
course.
Pokemon things. But of course, we know there's like a bajillion bad Pokemon spinoffs too, like Pokemon Channel or Hey You
Oh no.
Pikachu, or
No,
like
no, no, no.
a
Let's
lot of
not talk
that
about.
stuff that
I
don't even
don't
want to
even
go through.
like the Detective Pikachu as much. I think maybe it's for a certain crowd, but
Yeah.
it's not. I wouldn't think that like a majority of Pokemon people would be into that certain type of game. But anyways,
Hmm.
yeah, Pokemon Conquest, pretty great. I only learned about it much later though.
Yeah.
Like I was like maybe 2017. I'm like, wait, that was a game,
Yeah.
yeah, I had to get it and got into it. So
Yeah, I remember just
super
a
fun.
lot of people passed it by when it came out because they were like, "What? It's Nobunaga and Pokemon? Like, why would I buy this? Why would I be interested in this?" And maybe
Yeah,
that's why we never saw another one, because I don't think it sold very well. So that's
it
another
makes
game
sense.
too as far as DS games go. I think that's a game that's going to climb in price at some point soon. So it might be worth keeping your eye on if you're
Oh,
interested in
man.
checking that out. Because of course we have to at least mention that with some of these games we're going to talk about tonight too, Garrett, because there's going to be some expensive stuff that we talk about. But anyways, I kind of
I
wrap
got
those
you,
two
boy.
together. Pokemon Snap,
Cool,
Pokemon Conquest is kind of
cool.
my second one. So Garrett, hit me with something new. What do you got?
Yes. All right, let's talk about some Dragon Quest. There's some great Dragon Quest spinoffs, but one that I particularly got into more than the mainline games.
Yeah.
That is Dragon Quest Builders. Man, oh man, I love these sets of games. So Dragon Quest Builders, for people who don't know, it's kind of like I wouldn't say a Minecraft ripoff. It is a Minecraft kind of
It's a
revision
it's a
on
Minecraft
top of it with
like is what I would say.
yeah, a Minecraft like with a Dragon Quest spin for sure. You are the creator, you are the builder in a third person mode type of deal. It has that great art, that great Dragon Quest art, and I would say I love the structure of Dragon Quest Builders where you're going out into the world. It kind of it looks like Minecraft, right?
Mhm.
It's blocky and has that certain vibe to it. But then you go through the story and like, okay, you need to lay out blueprints to build off your settlements. And then so what do you need? You need certain materials. So you go out, harvest your materials, you come back and you build off of that and build your houses and build your stores. And so what you're doing is you're kind of just building your settlement from the ground up. And then from there you're increasing like, more options to get weapons or potions or armor or more quests or more villagers to join your settlement. It's interesting how they broke it into chapters too, where you get into a certain area and then you go to another area like for a second chapter. Um, but it just follows a storyline. And then you face monsters in an action role playing like way where you kind of hack and slash just these monsters. Pretty simple. But overall, it's a cute little role playing game. And it's pretty sizable length. It's out on Switch and PS4. I think it was on Game Pass at one point, right?
Yeah, I don't
Dragon
think it
Quest Builders
still is,
2.
but I know it
Yeah.
was, because I think they announced it last year at Tokyo Game Show that it was going to be on Game Pass. Just like
Yeah.
Scarlet
Yeah.
Nexus
And then I
and
got the
the
original
Sylveon
one on
Files.
Vita.
They came at the same time, I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. And then I got the original one on Vita, and that's how I got hooked with the Dragon Quest Builders. Anyways, super cute game. I think that's the one set of Dragon Quest games that would get me into the mainline ones. Like, okay, if I wrap these up, then I'll go into like Dragon Quest 11 or whatever.
Yeah.
That'll probably be the next one I'll try out. I know everyone's saying it's super long and classic, but I feel like it's the most modern one too.
It's fun. It's only like
Most
80
recent
or
one.
90 hours, Garrett. And the thing about Dragon Quest that you need to know is that, Dragon Quest 1 plays almost identically to Dragon Quest 11. So
Wow.
just be aware that even though it's the newest one, not much has changed, to the point like there's a reason why there's a 2D mode, like an NES style mode.
There is a 2D mode
for Dragon Quest 11. There's a reason why that's in there. It's because the game
That's pretty cool, actually.
pretty much unchanged from the previous one, besides the ability to like ride a horse and do a few other things. For the most part, it's pretty much the same kind of game. So it's just funny to think about. But yeah, I mean, Dragon Quest Builders, I knew it was one we were going to have to talk about on here. I mean, it's in the title, for God's sake. So of course we had to at least talk about it a little bit. But yeah, it's one of those games where like, I just didn't really get into it because that's really not my style of game, but I can see the appeal. Like I can tell, I could tell from playing it on Game Pass that, the quality was there and it seemed like it had like a fun gameplay loop if you're into that type of game.
Yes.
But yeah, I just couldn't really personally get into it, but I'm glad we included it here because I do think that's definitely a good spinoff and definitely probably the best Dragon Quest spinoff. And there's a bunch of them as well. And again, we'll actually get to one from our listener suggestions because we do have one about that. But even you've got, something like Dragon Quest Heroes, which is the Muso style
that's a good one too.
Dragon Quest games. They're not bad either. So.
See, I really liked Minecraft in high school and into college in like earlier Minecraft kind of versions. I really building stuff in Minecraft and like the circuitry and everything and the freedom of it. And I really enjoyed Dragon Quest Builders did a very good job of just grabbing those mechanics and but fixing it in a contained, structured role-playing game type of game, right? And like it has blueprints, it has quest lines. It's something that you won't see in Minecraft, but it grabbed like a lot of great parts from there. So
yeah, it took
awesome,
like a lot of the best
game.
elements from Minecraft and left a lot of the bad stuff behind, which is nice. But, yeah,
like flying everywhere.
Exactly. All right, Garrett. Well, as for me, you know me, I love Final Fantasy. And if there's one series that has like a bajillion spin-off games, it is Final Fantasy.
You're not wrong.
The series. And there's so many good choices to choose from. Now, in theory, I could have chosen the game that's on the thumbnail, which is probably the most obvious one, which is Final Fantasy Tactics. Great game, by the way. Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yes.
Chef's kiss. The game's amazing. So good that I actually did an actual chef's kiss into the microphone to indicate how good that is. But I have to steer it off because I got to give a special shout out to and kind of the game that I want to talk about in this slot to a game that I hear hardly anyone else talk about besides me. Because it was on the 3DS and it was the series that I think people just slept on, or they were like, why would I ever want to play this? But that is Theatrhythm Final Fantasy, which is the Final Fantasy rhythm game. That's also an RPG at the same time. And there's two of them. So there's actually Theatrhythm Final Fantasy and then Curtain Call Theatrhythm Final Fantasy. And Curtain Call is definitely the one that I would actually encourage people to check out if you're interested in it, because it does add a lot of upgrades to it. It unlocks more characters and it has a lot more music in it. But these games are basically rhythm games like the Persona games. But then depending on the type of music you're playing, the way you interact with the game is different. So, for example, if you're playing a battle theme from Final Fantasy, essentially what happens is on the right hand of your screen, you pick 4 of Final Fantasy heroes from across all of the Final Fantasy games, and it goes up to Final Fantasy 14 at the time that Curtain Call came out, as an example. So you choose 4 characters in your party, and then each of your characters has like a rhythm line associated with it. And then since this is a touchscreen game, you tap the screen depending on the area for the character that does an attack, and you'll see like the notes come across for each of the characters at different times. So you'll be kind of, switching between the different characters to do different attacks. And then as you progress through the battle, you'll have like different enemies appear on the left-hand side of the screen. And those enemies will be generated based on the music the game is from. So for example, if you're playing one of the Final Fantasy VII battle themes, you'll get Genova or Sephiroth or one of the other enemies that you fought in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
As you play through it, and you're killing the enemies because you're dealing damage to them as you play through it. Or likewise, if you're miss notes, your party members will take damage, and if you take too much damage, you'll start to lose party members. So it makes the game the songs a little bit more difficult. And then in the middle of the songs too, there's like a limit break section where if you nail all the notes, you then do like a summon to summon like Bahamut or one of the other creatures. Again, you can set that in the menu, and they're all pulled from all the different Final Fantasy games to take down different enemies. So it's just really, really cool. And then you've got the if you pick a field theme, so if you any of the themes that you get from exploring the world, you'll have like almost like a conductor's wand icon that comes up, and it basically as the screen side scrolls to the right, the line will kind of move up and down, and you have to move like the stylus up and down along with the line to basically trace the path along the way. And then you've got also these like music videos sections for certain songs as well, where if it's for like an important moment in the games, for example, they'll have like a music video that plays in the background with the like cinematics from the game itself as the music plays, and it kind of plays similar to the battle themes as well. So Theat Rhythm, again, 3 different styles of play, all super fun though. I really enjoyed the Theat Rhythm games a lot. And then they actually tried it a couple years ago with Kingdom Hearts, Melody of Memories, which plays very similar to those games as well, but it's just on all the other platforms, and they took out all the touchscreen stuff. But I like all those games, and to the point where like Melody of Memories actually made me care about Kingdom Hearts, and I hate Kingdom Hearts. So I actually like that game a lot. So yeah, I had to give it a special shout out here because, again, very creative when it comes to Final Fantasy games. And of course, the Final Fantasy games are known for excellent music across the series. So, it would just make sense that they have an excellent rhythm game to go along with that.
Nice. Well, that's a good share. I always seen these games on sale in the eShop, and I just never picked them up because I just don't know what they are. But now you're telling me what they are. If they ever go back on sale again, I do have my Nintendo account linked, so I can try to pick them up.
I was gonna say, since you said you like the Persona dancing games, I actually think you'd probably like these a lot. So because they feel very similar to play, but it obviously they play a little bit different than those games, but still really fun.
Yeah. Cool. I thought you were going to mention that other spin-off Final Fantasy game for a second on the 3DS. You remember Final Fantasy Explorers?
Yeah, I remember that game too. You had that. You also had World of Final Fantasy. You had a whole bunch of
World of Final Fantasy as well. Yeah.
Lots of different Final Fantasy spin-offs. There's so many to choose from, if I'm honest. And
many.
I might have one for honorable mentions as well, but we'll get to that later. But Garrett,
nice.
What else you got for me?
All right, I think this one was coming up too. We got to talk about the Monster Hunter series because there's probably isn't there only one spin-off series from the Monster Hunter games, and that is Monster Hunter Stories.
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
I think so.
I'm gonna Google it while you talk about it.
Yeah, sounds good. They may have a mobile game or something, but yeah, Monster Hunter Stories 1 and 2. So 1 came out on the 3DS, and 2 just recently came out on the Switch last year. A great set of turn-based battling games and set in the Monster Hunter universe. Very different than what you see in Pokemon, where there's a specific way to get these monsters. It's not necessarily you capturing one. You have to like go to its monster den and like grab a huge egg and then bring it back to your village and then let it hatch and stuff like that. Each monster has its own attribute. There's like kind of this triangle element going on. You got red, green, and blue. And depending on which move you're in, you could be strength or weak versus another. There's also different types of ways of formation with your monster. So I think it's a little bit different between 1 and 2. I just remember 2 mechanics a little bit more because I played it more recently. You can have an ultimate attack. You can like get on top of the monster as like riding it, and then do special combos and really great animations were set in Monster Hunter Stories 2. But yeah, overall great storyline, great game. It doesn't run the best on Switch, but that I mean like only in cities. It chugs pretty badly. I think in the middle of 2, I was getting a little bit bored, but it picked up at the end with the storyline itself. I like the first one a lot because it's just short and contained, and it's just there on the 3DS. It doesn't overstay its welcome. But yeah, I really like the style of Monster Hunter Stories too. It blew me away with the animation. It still blows me away. Like I was like, wow, that's the best looking Switch game in terms of animations I've seen in a long time. But yeah, I really enjoyed these games. I mean, like I do enjoy Monster Hunter Rise, but I'm not really much into the action role playing games. At least in the Monster Hunter series compared to the turn-based stuff. So yeah, great alternative, great games.
Yeah, I honestly like these are 2 games I just wish I had more time to play or just got into more. Because I did, start playing Stories 2 when it came out. I got maybe like 10 hours into it, and I put it down because I had, other stuff to review, and I just never had a chance to get back to it last year. And it's one that I regret putting down. Maybe I get to it at some point, but I know we're kind of into, the busy fall season of 2022. So maybe not this year, but at some point I do really want to, go back to it because I was really enjoying what I was playing of it. And I do think, there's a lot of good points about this game. And also to answer your question, Garrett, about are there other Monster Hunter spinoffs?
Yeah, are there?
Yes, but not in North America. They're all Japan only.
Oh, okay.
So we got, 2 Monster Hunter MMOs. And then you've also got this like village builder that came out on PSP. And as well as there's actually a Monster Hunter arcade game that was Japan only, and then of course lots of mobile Monster Hunter games as well.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but yeah, so to our eyes in North America, yes, Stories would be the only one, but there's been a lot more. They just never came out here for whatever reason.
Sounds good. Great games. Check them out. 2 is on PC as well, so go if you're worried about graphics and fidelity or whatever, just play on PC.
It's more along the lines of it's not even like making it prettier. It's like the frame rate is more concerning than the visuals for sure. But yeah, you're right. That's a good one as well. I had Monster Hunter Stories on like honorable mentions because I kind of figured you'd talk about it. But if you forgot, I was going to make sure to at least mention it. But yeah, definitely a good one to add here. Well, as for me now, Garrett, would you classify a MOBA as an RPG? Probably not, I would imagine. Because it has RPG elements, but it's not really an RPG. So this is where we get into a couple games I wanted to include that are spin-offs of other series that are not necessarily RPGs, but have RPG elements, but then went full-on RPG with their spin-off. And the first one I want to talk about is a game that came out last year that I think a lot of people missed out on, and that is The Ruined King, a League of Legends story. So this is this is a turn-based RPG in the League of Legends universe that's actually a prequel to the Arcane TV show, and it actually came out around the same time as the Arcane TV show, because Arcane is also a League of Legends prequel thing. So it takes place with some of the characters from League of Legends, and it's almost like this pirate-y kind of story where you're trying to track down some treasure, and you're fighting a lot of enemies along the way. it's just a really fun turn-based role-playing game that I was not expecting. Because first of all, I hate MOBAs and I don't like League of Legends at all, but I think the lore for League of Legends is really interesting, and there is like a lot of people that are just really into it for that reason, where I think like the lore for League of Legends is more interesting than the games themselves. But Ruined King took what I liked about the lore and then put it into a turn-based game, and I'm like, man, if they would have just been doing this all along, I probably would be way more into League of Legends if there were more games like this. So this was a game. This was like an honorable mention on my personal like game of the year list from last year when we did our game of the year showcase. And I enjoyed this game a lot. And this is one that I think just a lot of people missed out on last year or slept on because I just never hear anyone talk about this game at all. I think it just got lost in the shuffle with all the games that came out last year. But the Ruined King League of Legends story is fantastic. And honestly, again, it got me way more into League of Legends than I ever thought I would. Just like Arcane, the TV show did. And likewise, if you've watched Arcane
it's so good.
and you liked it and you haven't played this, I mean, go play Ruined King. It's great.
How long is it? Like, it's a short game,
It's a short game, yeah. You can beat it in like 20 hours or less, probably.
Yeah, okay, so 20 hours is still...
Well, 20 hours or less. I beat it in about 15,
or less. Okay.
But like how long the beat says 20. So that's why I said about 15 to 20.
Gotcha.
Probably fine.
I mean, that's still pretty good. Wow. I would have to check it out. I know you've been mentioning about this game, and I really enjoyed Arcane, the show. I am not into MOBAs at all.
Yeah.
Like I'm anti-MOBA. I'm like actually like I'm against Sonic. I'm against MOBA. Like that's where I stand.
See, that's the thing. I'm not even against Sonic, but you and I both agree that we're both against MOBAs at this point.
Yeah.
We're in the same boat.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly. And now soon I'll just turn you to the Sonic side and you'll be playing Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood before you know it, Garret.
Oh gosh, no, please.
It's an RPG. Nice. It counts, okay?
Something like that.
Yeah. Although that's another good example. I didn't even put it on my list, but that's another good example.
That's true. That's another spin-off RPG you could have mentioned.
Could have mentioned
Sonic.
But this episode's called the best RPG spin-offs, and I'm not comfortable enough saying Sonic Chronicles is probably one of the best RPG spin-offs. But it's good.
Good.
All right. Garret, you got one more for me?
That's a wrap for me.
Yeah, you got it?
No, that was my 4. I didn't want to put a 5th one to merit any because I just didn't have a 5th spin-off game that I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good.
Well, I'm going to give some honorable mentions and kind of, run through the games that I had on my list that I didn't get through. Number 1, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, the PSP spin-off of Final Fantasy VII, which is an action RPG. We're getting, the re-release of it later this year. And it looks awesome, and I really enjoyed the original game, so got to give a shout out to it here. Paper Mario, being a spinoff of the Mario series as an RPG, that game is incredible. And then Super Mario RPG, the OG, got to include that there as well. And then Minecraft Dungeons is the last one that I had from my list.
That was a great one.
Because a Minecraft in theory you could argue is like an action RPG. But Minecraft Dungeons just went full RPG in like the action RPG genre, and it's great. So,
dungeon crawling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fantastic as well.
It's super cool.
Had to include some of those, but let's get to some of the listener suggestions. And again, we got a lot of these, so huge thank you to everyone who submitted your favorite,
Thank you so
RPG spinoffs on the show here. We're going to start with the Muffin Mon, aka Kevin Ainsworth, who says, I just want to give it a special shout out to the recent amazing spin-off Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. It adapted all of the elements you love from Three Houses and applied the Warriors format to it. Phenomenal game. Yes, I mean, Kevin, that's one that I didn't put on my list, but absolutely you're right about that. Like, it did such a better job of representing the Fire Emblem world over the original Fire Emblem Warriors that, it's fantastic. So, glad you
need to play it. That's definitely on my Switch list. I played the demo. I really enjoyed it. It's just, haven't gotten around to it.
Next up, we got Kaboski, who says, I agree on Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. Also, does Persona count as a spin-off? If so, I'm adding it to the list and Persona Q. Well, Kaboski, we'll just count Persona Q on the list there.
Yes.
That's a good spin-off.
That's a good spin-off, yes.
Yeah. Next up, we got Skycatcher Gaming, and this one actually really surprised me. My all-time favorite RPG spin-off is Fortune Street for the Wii. It is like Monopoly, but way better. It has characters from Dragon Quest and Super Mario Brothers in the game. Garrett, I see you Googling right now. I'm guessing this means you haven't heard of Fortune Street before.
I've never heard of this game at
So
all.
Fortune Street is, to Skycatcher Gaming's point, basically like a Nintendo's version of Monopoly, where it's a digital board game.
Okay.
And it's kind of it's a crossover between Dragon Quest and Mario Brothers.
I've never thought this would be a thing, but okay. Yeah, no, that's Dragon Quest characters right in there.
It is.
Right. You got the slime.
It's so bizarre and totally out there, but it's totally a game that, again, everyone forgets it existed on the Wii. This is a big deal when it came out, though. People were excited about this, Garrett. They really wanted to take down that slime and buy up all the hotels and houses.
I never heard it. Wow, there's so many Dragon Quest characters too.
Yeah, like I said, it's pretty much a Mario and Dragon Quest crossover game in a board game, no less. But it's not even fun like Mario Party. That's the downside to it. It doesn't have any fun mini games. Okay. It is pretty much just like a straight board game, like a digital version of Monopoly. But Skycatcher Gaming says it's so addictive I could play it for 6 hours at a time in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, good for you. I would probably not play this game. It looks interesting though. Sure.
Well, next up, the Winter Gamer has been activated. He says Pokemon Conquest, and then just leaves it as that because he doesn't need to say anything else. Because Pokemon Conquest, as we talked about, is great. Go check it out.
It's fantastic.
Yeah,
go get it.
I'm actually kind of surprised that one never came to Wii U Virtual Console for DS games. I kind of wish it did though, because then I could play it on my Wii U and have a good time with Pokemon Conquest. You're giving me that look like, why would I play it on Wii U? I don't know. The Wii U was good for DS games. Okay.
Fisher Price toy. I understand there's so much great stuff on Wii U, but I don't understand why Nintendo hasn't carried that over.
Look, it's the definitive place to play Advance Wars Dual Strike, Garrett. Like that's the best place to go play it. Clearly is the Wii U. Well, next up, we got Blaze Knight, who says, I'll give my one spin-off shout out to Legend of Mana. It's definitely an underrated game in the Mana series. The Mana series as a whole is a spin-off since it started as Final Fantasy Adventures, although not really. Blaze Knight, I'm going to correct you at least a little bit on that because we talked about this on the Mana episode a long time ago last year, where it didn't start off as a Final Fantasy game. It actually started off as a completely different series, and I'm blanking on the series at the time. We talked about it on the episode, but I remember it wasn't Final Fantasy because the second series in Japan started as something else, but actually I'm misremembering it because it was Chrono Trigger that was supposed to be a member of the second series and then got spun off into its own thing, not the other way around.
Seiken Densetsu, that's the name, right?
Yeah. But
okay. Cool.
Yeah, so the Seiken Densetsu series in Japan just started out as its own thing, and then in North America they thought the Seiken Densetsu name wouldn't work, so they actually named it Final Fantasy Adventures instead. Because they did that with a couple of series, like the first Saga game that came to Game Boy Advance as well is named like Final Fantasy something. I'm blanking on that one too.
Mythic Quest.
Yeah,
I don't know.
but yeah, so Legend of Mana is a really good one on PS1. It also came to Switch and PlayStation 4. And you're basically like building a town while you're then going and doing all this action RPG quest stuff. It's pretty good. It's a pretty good game as well. But next up, I'm very excited for you to get hyped about this one, Garrett, even though you've never played these games before. TPR says, how did you like killing chaos in the cinematic masterpiece, Stranger of Paradise, Ryan? Ready for the DLC? And then I'm going to bring in Awesome Dave 1337 as well, who says, my favorite spinoff actually came out this year, and it would be Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. Killing chaos was a blast, and I had a ton of fun with the game.
Wow.
Yeah, not one, but two people saying Final Fantasy Origin, Garrett. That's pretty awesome. Again, I talked about it earlier this year. I actually like that game a lot too, like more than I thought I would.
That's what I hear.
Especially because the story is like super cheesy, but also I just like some of the nods to the old Final Fantasy games in there. To TPR's question though, am I ready for the DLC? Because they just announced new DLC this week featuring Gilgamesh, longtime Final Fantasy villain Gilgamesh from Final Fantasy V is going to be in the game. I'm actually pretty psyched for that. So, but I think I'm going to wait to play the DLC until the third DLC pack is out, and then I think I'm going to go back and play all three of these because they've had 3 DLC packs that are coming out for Stranger of Paradise.
Got it.
So even more
season pass.
Even more Limp Bizkit.
You're gonna kill all the chaos.
And killing the chaos. Oh man. So.
Gonna have a boombox over your shoulder while you slice up Gilgamesh.
Just hanging out with Jack Garland and Gilgamesh, having a battle on the bridge.
You're gonna hook up your wired earbuds with an iPod, you're right next to you.
I'm actually ready for them to do like like Limp Bizkit to do a remix of the Battle at the Bridge song, which is Gilgamesh's song when you fight him. I'm ready for that, and I'm here for that remix. Okay.
Oh no.
I'm excited. Well, next up, we got Seth Sturgill over on Twitter at $2 Hero. He says, my favorite RPG spinoff is definitely Dragon Quest Heroes Rocket Slime. Super unique gameplay loop and amazingly oozing personality. See what I did there? It's among my top 3 favorite Nintendo DS games of all time. Full stop. I've never played this game, and I don't really know anything about it.
Me neither.
I know it's a Nintendo DS game.
There's multiple ones, too. It looks like it. Wow. There's actually... Man, what was it called? Dragon Quest Monsters? That's another one that's like a catching Pokemon game I wanted to try out. Yeah. Looks like this one came out 2005. Wow, there was a Dragon Quest Heroes like slogan title way before Dragon Quest Heroes was ever a thing. So this is an action adventure game. It's not a role-playing game, it's an action adventure. It's like you're shooting slimes. Oh my gosh, you're shooting slimes, overhead viewing, and controlling the rockets entirely face shoulder buttons.
Oh.
I guess you're just shooting enemies in between with your slimes. I don't know. Something like that.
That's really weird, but sounds interesting. It sounds like a Nintendo DS game too, because a lot of companies decided to try all kinds of crazy stuff with the Nintendo DS. Like that, if they had a crazy idea, they put it on the Nintendo DS. That was what they did.
They had a great score too, 83 on Metacritic. So
nice.
Apparently, it's pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah. It is a sequel to Slime Mori Mori Dragon Quest Shogeki no Shippuden for the GBA.
Sure. So that sounds like a Japanese only game title if I've ever heard of one.
Definitely. Dragon Quest Heroes Rocket Slime came out in North America late 2006.
I'm sure the first one didn't though, but. Next up, we got Quagmire in the Discord who says, I really enjoyed Tokyo Mirage Sessions as a spinoff to Shin Megami Tensei and Fire Emblem. I love the combat system. I know we've talked about that one a lot on the show. That's why I didn't want to bring that one up in particular. Yeah. But that one's a really good one too. And it's definitely up there. Like I said, I think Shin Megami Tensei, besides Persona, I think it has like a lot of really good spinoffs between, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Soul Hackers 2, like the Devil Summoner games, the Digital Devil Saga games. Yeah. There's a lot of great Shin Megami Tensei spin-off games to choose from. So that's
all right. Hold on. Question for you, Ryan. Do you think Xbox Showcase, TGS, Soul Hackers 2 announced for Game Pass?
No, it's too soon.
It's too soon. Interesting. I know they're gonna release Japanese focused games.
Right.
At this showcase.
Yeah, we'll probably see a couple of them, just like last year, because that's when Scarlet Nexus came, when AI the Somnium Files came. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like Danganronpa 3, Danganronpa V3, because that's not out on Xbox yet, but we have the first two. So I imagine we probably get that there. I imagine from that showcase we also get, I don't know, maybe that's where we get Triangle Strategy actually on Xbox, or Bravely Default on Xbox.
That's possible.
Yeah. Because we've seen that them take that risk with Octopath.
AI and Somnium Files, right?
Yeah, they could do Nirvana Initiative, the new one. They could do that.
Yeah.
I think there's also the possibility that this is where we hear about Tales of Arise finally coming to Game Pass as well.
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
That would be a good
I thought it might have happened sooner, but that maybe a year and a half was the amount of time it needed to get there. But
definitely.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. And then we got 2 more questions that kind of have to do with spin-offs, but not really. We're going to start with Nagachaka at Nagachaka on Twitter, who says, what is your current hype levels for the upcoming remaster/remake of Final Fantasy VII spin-off Crisis Core Reunion? it's a smash hit. Do you think Square Enix will remaster the other Final Fantasy spin-offs like Before Crisis or Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII? So my hype levels, as I mentioned before, Nagachaka are, pretty high for Crisis Core Reunion. I'm very excited for it. Again, I love the PSP one. And this just gets it into more hands for people to be able to play, because it's pretty much coming out on every console under the sun, including on Xbox, where I'm excited to actually play this game on Xbox. Like, that's where I'm going to be probably picking this one up. So yeah, I think if this does well, will they bring the other games though, Before Crisis and Dirge of Cerberus? Probably not. I don't think that's going to indicate those coming over, especially like a game like Dirge of Cerberus specifically, because that, for folks that don't know, it's a third-person action shooter similar to something like Devil May Cry, starring Vincent Valentine, but it controlled horribly on PlayStation 2, and it was just not a very good PlayStation 2 game. It had a cool story, but everything else about that game was awful. So I don't know if that would require a lot of work for them to bring that one over. But you never know. They're bringing a lot of Final Fantasy VII stuff back, so maybe Dirge of Cerberus gets pulled up into it. I guess it kind of depends on like how integral the knowledge of the Dirge of Cerberus story is going to be needed to understand what they're doing, what direction they're going with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because I think the reason why they're doing Crisis Core is because, Zack's story from Crisis Core is going to play a lot more into the second chapter of Final Fantasy VII Remake. So I think it makes sense for them to put that out. Whereas Dirge of Cerberus is actually a sequel to Final Fantasy VII, and it takes place after the story. So I don't know how necessary it is. And that's why I'm less inclined to think if they do that. And Before Crisis 2 kind of falls into the same camp, where it depends on if the Before Crisis story is needed to know for, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 or whatever. But we'll see. And Garrett, of course, I know you haven't played any of these games, so I'm not going to ask your opinion on them.
No comment.
No comment.
We'll play games.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Last question is a big hypothetical one. This comes to us once again from Blaze Knight, who stated he started to do shoutouts to awesome spin-offs games, but he realized that we probably will cover almost every spin-off game that he was going to talk about. So instead, he was going to ask us a question. If you could pick a console to get all of the JRPGs remade for modern consoles or PC, which console would you pick? A caveat would be the remakes on that system that already exists on that system wouldn't count. So example, if you've got, the PS1 and like the Lunar remakes, for example, wouldn't come over to this if we were to port all the PlayStation 1 games over.
Got it.
So that's kind of the idea. Or likewise, the NES games, the NES Final Fantasy games that are pure on PlayStation 1 wouldn't come over if we picked, PlayStation 1 to come over. So, Garrett, to give you time to think about this one, I had some time to think about this one before we're getting started on this one. And I'm going to say the most Ryan Turford answer out there. You could probably even guess already what I'm going to say.
Oh, yeah.
Because in my mind's eye, Garrett, as I peer into my mind's eye and, think about what I should do about this, it goes in one of two directions. Because I think there were two really great consoles for RPGs that people just missed out on because those consoles were prohibitively expensive or they came out at the wrong time. And I think those would be the perfect consoles to get their entire slate of RPGs to modern platforms. So I'm actually going to throw a curveball here because normally I think my default answer to this question would probably be Sega CD, because everyone kind of knows how I feel about Sega CD at this point. But I'm going to throw a curveball in here and say Sega Saturn. I want all the RPGs that, number one, exist on Sega Saturn to be ported to modern consoles with North American localization. That's a key here. North American localization.
That's true.
For all of the RPGs on Sega Saturn. That includes Magic Knight Rayearth. That includes Panzer Dragoon Saga. That includes all of the Shining Force 3 games, because there's 3 of them. We need all these Sega Saturn games to come back. And Sega Saturn is already an expensive enough console to collect for, and if you want the RPGs, it's even more expensive. So I think this would be my pick is Sega Saturn, but Sega CD is my runner up here. It's what I would pick, because again, like I wanted to, for a question like this, it makes the most sense to pick a console that has great RPGs on it that we just don't have access to on modern consoles. But Garrett, I'm going to throw it to you now that I've explained my case and given you some time to think. What do you think about Blaze Knight's question?
Yeah, it's a very good question. The two consoles that really I focus on with this question is either gonna be NES or SNES. And just because I rarely go back to those systems for role-playing games, other than, of course, the Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn, whatever. But I
Yeah.
really wanted to I really do want to explore more of those role-playing games, although I just don't really want to go back to those kind of I wouldn't say like old mechanics per se. It's just like in my mind, like they're dated.
Right.
Like I understand they don't have all the modern quips like I don't know, like save points or like a kind of a direction per se. But yeah, I would like either of those two consoles, maybe SNES more than anything, because there's a lot of role playing games in there that I just have not played, and I probably wouldn't play,
Yeah. And that falls in the camp
unless
too,
they
where
were
there's a lot
ported
of them that
over.
aren't on modern consoles too. Like I talked about the
Yeah,
Lufia games not too long ago. Like those are in
yeah,
there. Illusion of Gaia, Secret of Evermore. Like there's a lot of games on that console that are just kind of stranded there as well.
for sure. Yeah, yeah. So I think SNES would be my pick. Other games I'm thinking of GBA, but I think those are pretty accessible. At
Yeah.
least how I'm playing them.
Especially
So
on
I'm
Wii
not like
U specifically. Like Wii U Virtual
yeah.
Console, believe it or not, actually had a lot of GBA role playing games. Like it
Oh,
has
that's kind
a lot
of
of the
cool.
best ones, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Hmm. And then other than that, PS1 is a big top contender as well, just because it's just the textures in it is pretty dated right now. Like porting those, like a lot of those role playing games over,
Hmm.
um, with modern quips would be updated textures would be really nice to see.
Yeah.
But I my first and foremost pick I think is SNES because I think it has a lot of great role playing games. I just will never get to if that makes sense, or never touch unless it's like ported over to a modern console.
Yeah, like you're not gonna dig out. You're not gonna be like mere Rebecca and pulling out your Super Nintendo
Right.
and hooking up your TV and throwing the cartridges in there. That's not Garrett Bland's
Exactly.
style.
No.
No. Yeah, that's a good one too, actually. Because again, like you said, there's a lot of stranded games there. Like another console I would have maybe thrown in there was even Sega Genesis, but a lot of those games we've been getting those pretty recently. So I don't even think I need to, shout out my boy, the Sega Genesis, in this one here. And of course, Rival Flavins in the chat just says, apparently we just want the Zelda 2 remake, and that's absolutely correct. Of course, we need that game.
That would be cool. And I would actually play that Zelda game.
Actually,
Like
we talked about
I
it.
would go through it.
Sean and I actually talked about this on our Patreon exclusive podcast this week, the Yumi Capri podcast,
Yeah.
where we talked about the idea of bringing back some old games with some new, like new stuff, like a remakes of old games or sequels to old games. And one of the ones I
Mhm.
actually brought up was Zelda 2. Like I would love the idea of them doing something like Link Between Worlds, but with Zelda 2. So
Yeah.
like where they make a sequel to it in that style, but then give it like modern gameplay conveniences. I think like people would actually really enjoy that game a lot, even though it's
Mhm.
different from other Zelda games. I think that would actually be like a
Mhm.
really good game. It's the
Definitely.
same thing I've been saying to Tecmo all these years, how they haven't, they should go back and make an old Ninja Gaiden game, because that Sabotage, the studio that did The Messenger, proved that that style still works. So
Fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, so there's a lot of old franchises I would love to see like that. And plus, Garrett, if you got your wish about the NES coming back, you'd be able to get Ghost Lion again, that game we talked about a while ago with that amazing box art of the aerobics instructor and
Oh, buddy.
the albino lion on the front. Oh man, oh that'd be so good.
As the icon of the early 90s, late 80s.
Clearly, except for
Ghost
the fact
Lion.
that that game came out in 1994. So
Oh, that's I don't know what they were thinking
I
then
don't
with
know
that
either,
cover
because it's
art.
the most like 80s box art ever, but it was one of the last games to ever come out on the NES. So
Interesting.
there you go. Well,
So interesting.
anyways, Garrett, we got to go. But before we go, Garrett, let's go.
You can follow me on Twitter at Blind Explosion. You can also find me on the Nintendo Shack, part of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network, where we're live each and every Fridays now.
Ooh.
Friday nights over at twitch.tv/PSVG, and release on all the podcast services. And we're live on YouTube and Facebook as well, apparently.
Apparently.
So yeah, so go check us out there. And then you can just follow me whenever I stream, twitch.tv/Blind Explosion.
Nice.
I haven't streamed as much recently, but
Yeah.
I will set a schedule. Maybe after my trip, I will be definitely or more regular times for streaming.
We haven't mentioned it yet, but Garrett's actually going on a trip to Europe in a few weeks, so we're gonna be missing Garrett for a few weeks. But don't worry, folks, we're gonna still have some RPG goodness while Garrett's away. But as for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. I'm tweeting again, so you can go head on over there. Also, we might have some stuff on the channel before next episode to watch out for. Wink, wink. But also, you can find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming. You also find us right here on YouTube, youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, on podcast services around the globe. So, for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the Nintendo 64th level of the RPG Cave.
Nice.
And we're out.
Bye-bye.